There is a line from a very old book, so old that no one remembers the exact day it was first spoken aloud, that goes something like this: "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." You have probably heard something like this before. Perhaps it sounded like a great deal of pressure. Perhaps it landed in you like one more thing to manage, one more place where you might be getting it wrong. If so, that is a completely reasonable way to hear it. And tonight, if it feels all right, we might sit together with that old line and turn it over slowly, the way you might turn a smooth stone in your hand in the dark, not to study it, just to feel it, because there is another way to hear it, a softer way. If the mind is everything, then a mind that has finally come to rest, a mind that has put down its arguments and its worries and its long lists, that mind becomes something very close to peace. And peace, tonight, is exactly where we are headed. Not by force, not by instruction, simply by walking together toward it, slowly, the way you might walk to a place you have been before and already know is safe. So let your eyes close, or let them rest soft and unfocused on the dark. Let the weight of your body fall a little more into whatever is holding you. You do not need to bring anything with you into this conversation. You do not need to have read the old book or to understand what any of its words mean. You do not need to know anything at all. This is not a lesson. It is more like a long, unhurried walk through some very old and very gentle ideas on a quiet evening with no particular place to be. If you like, take a single slow breath now. Let the air come in without effort and let it leave the same way. We will begin. There is a teaching that appears near the very beginning of the Dhammapada, which is simply an ancient collection of short, clear sayings about the mind and the life of a human being. And the teaching, if you soften around it a little, goes something like this: all that we are is shaped by our minds. If a person acts from a troubled mind, difficulty follows them, the way a wheel follows the foot of an ox. But if a person acts from a clear mind, ease follows them, the way a shadow follows without ever leaving. The image of the shadow is worth holding for a moment. A shadow does not struggle to keep up. It does not strain or force. It simply belongs to the person who casts it. And so, the teaching suggests that ease, in its truest form, is not something we go out and collect. It is something that belongs to us already, or rather, it becomes available to us the moment the mind clears enough to cast it. Tonight, we are not going to try to clear the mind. That is not the kind of thing you can do by trying. We are simply going to sit with these old ideas together and let them do their slow, quiet work on their own. But first, and this is important, because it is something you may need to hear, the teaching is not saying that a troubled mind is a failure. It is not saying that if you lie awake with your thoughts circling, you have done something wrong, or that you are not trying hard enough, or that something is broken in you. What it is saying is simply that the mind has a nature, like water has a nature, like wind has a nature, and understanding that nature, just a little, just enough to soften around it, is perhaps the oldest human act of kindness. You lie down and the mind starts. It begins its inventory. It picks up the thing that happened at noon and turns it over. It reaches forward into tomorrow and finds things to worry about there. It catalogues old conversations. It rehearses things you might have said differently. This is what minds do. It is not your fault. It is not a malfunction. It has been doing this since long before you were born. People lying down in the dark have had the same experience for as long as there have been people and darkness. What the old teachers noticed is that you do not have to be swept away by it. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a weaver who lived in a small town at the edge of a wide valley. She was known for her work. The cloth she made was fine and even, and people came from some distance to buy it. But she was also known for her restlessness. Every night, when the loom went quiet and the house grew still, her mind grew loud. It rehearsed her errors. It asked whether the price she had charged was the right one. It compared her work to the work of a weaver in a neighboring town, whom she had never met but had heard much about. One autumn, she traveled to visit an old teacher who lived in a simple house at the edge of the valley on the other side of the hills. She told him about the nights, about the mind that would not stop. He listened for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "When you are weaving, does your mind still do this?" She thought about it. "No," she said. "When I'm weaving, I am only weaving." He said, "And does the cloth suffer because of it? Does it come out wrong?" "No," she said. "The cloth is fine." He said nothing more for a moment. Then he said, "Perhaps the night is also just another kind of loom, and you are between rows." She went home and lay down that night, and when the mind began, she did not fight it. She thought, "I am between rows. The shuttle has stopped for now." And something in her, not the mind exactly, but something underneath the mind, softened by just a fraction. It is worth noticing what the teacher did not say. He did not say, "Stop your thoughts." He did not say, "Try harder." He offered her a different image for the same experience, not a broken thing. A pause between rows. Perhaps tonight, when a thought comes, and thoughts will come, this is certain, you might try the weaver's small and gentle image. A pause between rows. The loom resting, the cloth still whole. Let your attention drift now if it wants to. Let the shoulders fall a little more. There is nothing happening here that requires you to hold yourself upright. You are already doing fine, simply by being here. When you are ready, we will go on. There is another passage in the old book that points to something strange and quietly wonderful about the nature of the mind. It says, in the plain and gentle way the book has, the mind is hard to check. It is swift and wanders where it will. But the trained mind brings happiness. The word trained can sound heavy. It can sound like discipline, like effort, like rising before dawn and sitting very still and doing something correctly for a long time. And perhaps for some people, in some lives, it looks a little like that. But the kind of training the old teachers most often described was much quieter, much closer to befriending, not conquering the mind, befriending it. There is a difference, and the difference matters, especially at night, especially here. Conquering the mind means fighting it. It means treating every wandering thought as an enemy to be defeated. And anyone who has tried this knows what happens. The fighting becomes its own kind of noise, and you end up lying there engaged in a silent battle that keeps you just as awake as the thoughts themselves. Befriending the mind means something else. It means looking at the thought, the one about tomorrow, or the one about the old argument, or the one that has no name, but only a vague and shapeless weight, and saying quietly and without drama, "Ah, there you are. I see you." And then letting it pass on its own, the way clouds pass across a wide sky, without the sky having to do anything at all. The sky does not push the clouds. The sky does not gather them in or chase them away. The sky simply is, enormous, open, unhurried. And the clouds do what clouds do, which is move. You are the sky tonight. not the clouds. Let us explore a story about this, a different kind of story from a different life. There was a fisherman who had gone out alone for many years in the early mornings to fish the wide lake at the bottom of his valley. He knew the lake well, its moods, its colors, its silences. But what he had not noticed until a very old woman pointed it out to him one morning when he came back with almost nothing, was that he always tensed his arms when he pulled the net. She had been sitting on the shore watching. She said, "You pull against the water. You treat it like an argument." He said, "I have to pull, otherwise the net does not come in." She said, "Yes, pull. But you are pulling against it. There is a difference. The net wants to come in. The water does not hold it. Only your grip fights." He was not sure he understood, but that evening he sat by the lake and watched the water, and he noticed that the surface, when he stopped disturbing it, went absolutely flat, not still in the way of something frozen, still in the way of something that had simply stopped being pushed against. The next morning he pulled the net gently, with the water rather than against it, and something did shift, not dramatically, not in a way that would make a good story of triumph, but in a quiet and bodily way. His shoulders stopped aching before noon. The lake had not changed. His grip had. The mind at night is sometimes like that lake. We pull against it. We argue with it. We treat its movements like a problem to be solved by force. And the mind, like the water, does not actually yield to force. It only reflects the force back, doubled, until we are both exhausted. The thought that comes tonight, whatever it is, you are not obliged to grip it. You are not obliged to pull against it. You can simply let it move the way it will move and trust that it will pass, because thoughts, like waves, always do pass. Every one of them, without exception. They arrive and they go, and the surface, eventually, goes flat. Rest your hands now. Soften the grip. In the hands, in the jaw, in whatever place in the body you have quietly been bracing without realizing it. That is a place the mind has been living in your body tonight. You can let it go a little. You do not have to be ready for anything. Let a slow breath find its way through you. Notice the dark room, or the quiet, or the softness of the surface beneath you. When you are ready, we will continue on. Perhaps one of the most tender teachings in the entire old book is this: if you can find even one person who is patient with you in your difficulty, walk with them. Walk with them the way a person walks with a lamp in the dark. It is a small image, a lamp in the dark, not a torch, not a great blazing fire. A lamp, the kind that gives just enough light to see the next step without blinding you. The teaching is sometimes read as advice about finding a good teacher or a wise friend, and that is one way to hear it. But tonight, in this quiet, there is perhaps another way. You have been walking in the dark for a while, and you have, perhaps without noticing, been carrying a lamp. The lamp is the part of you that is still here, the part that lay down and reached for something gentle tonight, the part that is breathing slowly, even now, without being told to. That part has always been here, even in the most difficult nights, even when the mind was at its loudest. It is not a special or unusual thing. It is simply the deepest part of being alive, the part that continues without your effort, like a flame that burns without being watched. This is what some of the old teachers called the undisturbed place. Not a place you build, not a place you find after a great journey, the place that is already here, underneath everything else. The breathing continues. The heart does its work. The body restores itself in the dark. These things happen without you. They are happening right now. Let us explore a story about the lamp and the dark. There was an apprentice who was learning the art of tending an orchard, an old skill, one that required patience and a sensitivity to things that could not be rushed. The orchard had 100 trees, and each tree had its own character, its own timing, its own way of coming into fruit. The young man was diligent. He watered. He pruned at the right times. He watched carefully. But he was also impatient in a way that comes naturally to a young person learning something worth caring about. He wanted the trees to go faster. He wanted to see progress that he could point to. And at night, lying in the small room at the edge of the orchard, he worried about the trees that seemed to be lagging, the trees whose fruit was late, the trees whose leaves had gone a color he didn't quite trust. His teacher, who was very old and who had been tending orchards since before the young man was born, sat with him one evening at the edge of the orchard and said only this: "The tree does not know it is late. It is simply being a tree." The young man thought about that for a long time. Then his teacher added, "And you are simply being the person who is learning to let a tree be a tree. That is enough. That is the whole work." He went to sleep that night with something eased in him that he couldn't quite name. The trees had not changed. The worry had not disappeared entirely, but there was a small shift, a willingness to let the orchard be the orchard, and to trust that things were moving even when he could not see them moving. The mind at night is sometimes like that orchard. We stand at the edge of it and we worry about the trees that seem late, the problems that have not yet resolved, the things in our lives that are in some phase we cannot name and cannot hurry. And the teaching of the lamp, the small, patient lamp in the dark, is simply this: you do not have to see the whole orchard tonight. You only need enough light for the next moment, and that light you already have. There is also this: sometimes the most patient person walking with us in the dark is not another person at all. Sometimes it is the breath that keeps coming back, patient and unhurried, all night long, whether or not you are watching it, whether or not you are grateful to it, whether or not you even notice it. The breath is walking with you tonight. It has never stopped. Let there be a soft moment here, just for that. Let the breath do what it does, and let yourself feel, if only barely, that something is taking care of you. Not a great or dramatic something. The small, continuous, completely reliable something of being alive in a body that knows how to rest. Your shoulders can soften a little more. The weight of the body can go further into the surface below you. There is nothing you need to do with any of this. We will go on gently when you are ready. The old book speaks at some length, in its quiet and unflashy way, about what it calls a tamed mind. And the word tame is one that can catch. It can sound like suppression, like forcing a wild thing into a small cage. But that is not what the old teachers meant by it. They meant something closer to what you might mean when you say a river is tamed, not dammed, not stopped, not killed, but channeled, gently guided, given a bank to run along so it can move beautifully without flooding everything. The tamed mind in the teaching is not a silent mind. It is not a mind without thoughts. It is a mind that knows it is a mind that has learned, slowly and with patience, to watch its own movements without being dragged into every one of them. This is perhaps the most useful thing the Dhammapada offers, and it does not offer it dramatically. It offers it the way a patient old teacher offers most useful things, quietly, in passing, as if it were obvious. the mind that watches itself, is already partly free, because what it is watching cannot, at the same moment, carry you away. There is a story sometimes told about this, from a different angle. In a small mountain village, there was a woman who was known for her stillness. People came to her for advice, not because she had any special training or position, but because she seemed always to be less alarmed by things than everyone else. She seemed to take the news, good or bad, with the same quality of attention, not indifference, something warmer than that, something closer to a steady presence. One day, a young woman, who was prone to great waves of feeling, one moment bright and certain, the next anxious and lost, came to ask her how she managed it, how she stayed so steady, how she didn't get swept away. The older woman said, "I do get swept away. I have simply started noticing the sweeping earlier." The young woman didn't understand. She asked her to say more. The older woman said, "When the water rises, I now know it is the water rising. I know that I am the person in the water, not the water itself. And once I know that, even in the middle of the flood, there is something in me that is still standing on the bank." The young woman carried that home with her and turned it over for many nights, standing on the bank. Even in the middle of the flood, something in us that stands on the bank. This is not a great achievement. It is not something you have to earn. The teaching is that it is already your nature, this capacity to notice the mind rather than be entirely eaten by it. You have been using it your whole life. Every time you have ever had the thought, "I am thinking too much," or "I am worrying about something that hasn't happened," or "I know I'm making more of this than it deserves," in that moment, there was something in you standing on the bank, noticing the water. That noticing is the beginning of everything the old book describes. And tonight, you do not have to do anything with it. You do not have to practice noticing. You do not have to stand on the bank deliberately or carefully. Simply knowing that the bank exists, that there is a part of you that is not made of thoughts, is enough for tonight. Let us explore another story from a slightly different direction. There was once a man who repaired old clocks for a living. He worked in a small, very cluttered room that was full of the sound of ticking. An orchestra of small mechanical voices, all moving at slightly different rhythms, all doing their particular work. Visitors to his room often said they found the sound maddening. "How can you think," they asked, "in all this noise?" He said, "At some point, I stopped trying to hear individual clocks and simply heard the whole room. And once you hear the whole room, it is not noise anymore. It is more like weather." He meant that the ticking, when you stop fighting it and stop trying to sort it, became something you could be inside of, rather than something that was happening to you. The thoughts at night are sometimes like this. Individually, each one can feel very loud and very demanding. But when you step back, not to another room, not to somewhere away from the thoughts, just a fraction back, just enough to see that there are many of them, and they are all moving. They can begin to sound less like emergencies and more like weather. A kind of weather happening in the mind, doing what weather does, which is move through and eventually pass. You are not obliged to attend to each individual thought tonight. You can let the whole room tick. You can be inside it without being carried by any particular clock. Rest here for a moment. Feel the weight of the body. Feel that the body is being held by the surface beneath you, by gravity, by the simple and reliable fact of the ground. The mind can move all it likes. The body is staying right here. The body knows where it is, and you are in the body. You are safe. We will go on when you are ready. There is a passage in the old book that has always struck certain people as almost too simple to be true. It says that hatred is never appeased by more hatred. It is only appeased by love, or by something the old teachers sometimes called goodwill. And this is an ancient truth, perhaps the oldest one. Now, the word hatred is a strong word. You may be thinking that tonight you do not feel hatred, just ordinary worry, or ordinary tiredness, or ordinary low-level dissatisfaction with some part of your day. And that is probably true. But the teaching is pointing at something that lives in ordinary worry and ordinary dissatisfaction as well. It is pointing at a quality of the mind that treats things as opponents. That meets the unwanted with a kind of invisible pushing, that greets difficulty by tightening. The opposite of that tightening, what the old teachers called goodwill, or sometimes loving kindness, is not a warm feeling you produce by effort. It is closer to an opening, a release of the invisible grip, a way of meeting whatever is here with something slightly softer than a fist. You may be meeting tonight's wakefulness with a fist right now, just a small one. You may be tightening around the fact of lying awake, treating the wakefulness as an adversary to be defeated. If so, you would not be alone in this. It is possibly the most common response in the world to the experience of not sleeping when you wanted to sleep. And the old teaching, gentle as it is, simply says, what if you put the fist down? Not to give up, not to resign yourself, just to put the fist down. There is a story sometimes told about this. There was a gardener who grew very fine vegetables in a small plot behind her house. She had a problem every spring with a particular plant, a fast-spreading vine that came back every year and wound itself around her crops if she didn't stay vigilant. For years she attacked it every morning. She pulled it out by the root. She cut it back. She dug deep to find where it was coming from, and every spring it came back, no matter what she did, and she hated it a little more each year. One spring she was too tired and too unwell to keep up the fight, and she simply let the vine go for a while. She watched it grow. She noticed, after some weeks, that it was not actually killing her vegetables. It was weaving around them, finding the spaces. It was only when she pulled hard that it gripped hard in return. She started to see it differently, not as something to conquer, as something to manage gently from the side, redirecting it when it went where she didn't want it. Her crops were better that year than they had been in a long time, not because the vine was gone, but because she had stopped waging a full war, and the energy she had spent fighting went back into the garden itself. The thoughts that come tonight, the worries, the unfinished things, the old arguments, they are a little like the vine. Fighting them directly rarely works, and the fighting is its own kind of noise, but a gentle, unhurried redirection. And oh, there you are. And then a soft turn of attention back to the breath, or the weight of the body, or the dark room. That is different. That is not suppression. It is something closer to gardening. Let us explore one more small story that lives near this same teaching. There was an elder in a monastery by the sea who was visited regularly by a young monk who struggled enormously with his own anger. The young monk was not a violent person. He would not have hurt anything or anyone, but inside, the anger was a constant fire. Old slights, perceived injustices, a bottomless supply of memories about times he had been treated poorly, and a bottomless rehearsal of what he wished he had said. He told the elder, "I have tried to stop being angry. I cannot do it. No matter what I try, it comes back. The elder listened for a long time. Then he said, "And what do you do with it when it comes?" The young monk said, "I argue with it. I tell it it's wrong. I tell myself I shouldn't feel it." The elder said, "And does that work?" "No," said the young monk. The elder said, "What if instead, when the anger comes, you simply offered it a seat, as you would offer a difficult guest a seat, not because you agree with it, not because you welcome it, simply because a seated guest causes less trouble than one standing in the doorway?" The young monk was not sure this made sense, but that night, when the familiar fire came, he tried it. He thought, "Sit down." And he sat with it, without fighting it, for a little while. And the fire did something he had not expected. It flickered. Not out, not entirely, but it flickered. Whatever you are bringing to this night, the worry, the restlessness, the thought that keeps returning, perhaps it simply needs a seat, not to be given permission to run the whole room, just a seat, a moment of not being fought. And in that moment, it will do what it always does when it is not being amplified by argument. It will flicker. Let the body settle now. Let whatever has been sitting upright inside you find a softer angle. The breath is still there, patient as ever. The room is still quiet, or nearly quiet. You are still safe. We will move on slowly when you are ready. The old book speaks of what it calls the Dhamma, a word that resists easy translation, but that the teachers most often rendered in ordinary language as something like the nature of things, or the way things are, or simply the truth. And one of the clearest things the Dhamma says about human experience is that it is not fixed, that it moves, that everything that arises also passes. This teaching about impermanence, about the passing nature of all things, can sound at first like loss, like a reminder that nothing lasts, and that is one face of it. But the teachers were careful to point out the other face, which is the face that matters most at night. If everything that arises also passes, then the wakefulness too passes. The anxious thought too passes. The heaviness in the chest that has no clear name too passes. Not as a comforting story, not as something you have to believe, but as a simple, observable fact about the nature of experience. You have never had a thought that did not, eventually, end. Not one. Not even the worst one. Every single thought you have ever had has passed. You have survived every difficult night you have ever had. Every single one. This is not a small thing. Let us explore a story about impermanence and about the strange relief that lives inside it. There was a potter who worked in a studio in a small town by a river. She made bowls, mostly bowls, and she had been making them for a long time. She knew clay the way some people know an old friend. She knew how it moved, how it wanted to be handled, what it would and would not do. Every year the river would flood. It did not flood badly. It was a gentle flooding, the kind that happened predictably, and that the whole town had arranged its life around. But every year the studio floor would take on an inch or two of water, and the potter would have to move her work to the shelves and wait. For the first few years this infuriated her. She lost time. She lost one or two pieces that weren't dry enough to survive the move. She resented the river. Then, one flood season, she was moving a bowl she had been especially pleased with, and she noticed that the reflection of the bowl in the thin film of water on the floor was, if anything, more beautiful than the bowl itself. More blurred, more wavering, more alive. She stood there for a long time looking at the reflection. After the flood receded and she went back to work, Something had shifted. She didn't stop minding the flooding, but she stopped fighting it in the same way. She began to see the flooding as part of the cycle, something that arrived and moved through and left the way seasons do, the way moods do. Something that did not end the work, only interrupted it briefly, and in interrupting it, offered something unexpected. The difficulty you are carrying tonight, whatever shape it has, is in a flood season of its own. It has arrived. That is true. And like the river, it will recede. Not tonight, maybe. Or maybe tonight. That is not yours to know. But it is not permanent. It is not the permanent state of things. It is a season. And like the potter's bowl, something inside you may survive the water in better shape than you expect. There is also this, about impermanence. The pleasant things pass too. The old teachers were careful about this one, because it can also sound like loss. But what they meant by pointing to it was not grief. It was invitation. The invitation to be where you are, with what is here, without needing it to last or hurry past. You are here tonight. That is something. This breath is here. That is something. The quiet, or whatever particular quiet belongs to your room tonight, is here. These things are passing too. Every breath passes, every moment of quiet passes, but while they are here, they are real. And the mind that has softened enough to notice them, even slightly, is a mind that has found its way to something the old teachers called presence. Not presence as an achievement, presence as a natural settling. The way water, when it is left alone, finds its own level. Let your attention find its own level now. Let it rest where it naturally rests. The breath, the body, the room, or simply the darkness. Whatever it lands on, let it stay there softly, without grip. The teachings will keep going gently, and you do not have to follow every word. You only have to be here. Breathe slowly. The body is heavy and warm. When you are ready, we will go on. The old book returns again and again to the idea of the path, not in the sense of a destination, not a place you arrive at, and then you are done, but in the sense of a way of walking, a way of moving through the ordinary moments of a life. And the path, as the teachers describe it, is less about great acts of discipline and more about a quality of attention brought to small things. The quality of attention they describe is careful, unhurried, awake in an ordinary, undramatic way. There is a teaching that says, let go of what has already passed. Let go of what has not yet come. Look deeply into the present moment, and there you will find rest. Let go of what has already passed. You know this instruction. You have given it to yourself probably many times. And you also know how difficult it can be to follow. Not because you are weak, but because the mind has a deep love for the past. It returns to it the way a tongue returns to a sore tooth. Not because it enjoys the pain, because it is trying, in its own confused and loyal way, to understand, to resolve, to find the thing it missed, and let go of what has not yet come. The future, which does not exist yet, which may never exist in the shape the mind constructs. The mind visits it with tremendous frequency and tremendous sincerity, as if its worry were a kind of preparation, as if imagining all the bad outcomes would somehow protect against them. This too is a form of loyalty, a misguided one, perhaps, but not an evil one. Look deeply into the present moment. The present moment is the only place rest actually lives. Not rest as a destination, but rest as a quality. The quality of not being pulled toward what has passed or what is coming. The quality of being, simply and completely, here There is a story sometimes told about the present moment and the two great weights that pull us away from it. There was a traveler who crossed a wide river on a narrow wooden bridge. He had made this crossing many times. The bridge was safe. Many people crossed it every day, but it was narrow enough that you had to pay attention to where you were stepping. One day, crossing the bridge, the traveler was in the grip of a memory, a disagreement he'd had several days earlier with a person he cared about. And while he was inside the memory, he nearly stepped off the edge. He caught himself. He stood there on the narrow bridge, heart quick, and looked down at the river below. He stood there for a long time, not because he was frightened exactly, but because something had clarified. The river was real. The bridge was real. The next step was real. None of the rest of it. The argument, the future conversation he had been planning, the old wound, was here on this bridge. He was the only thing here on this bridge. He crossed the rest of the bridge one step at a time, looking at each plank. He did not solve the argument that day. He did not stop missing the person, but he crossed the bridge safely, and that was the task the present moment required of him. The present moment tonight requires very little of you. It requires only this: one breath, one exhale, one small settling of the body into the surface below. You do not have to cross the whole bridge tonight, only the plank you are on. Let us explore one more story, because this teaching about the present deserves another angle. There was a woman who kept a record of every day, not a formal diary, not a careful accounting, but a single short line each evening before she slept. One thing that had been true that day, a thing she had noticed or felt. Not an achievement, just something true. She had kept this record for many years, and when she was very old and someone asked her what had come from all that recording, she said something that surprised the person asking. She said, "I learned that no day was entirely lost. Some days felt entirely lost while I was inside them. But when I wrote the line at the end, I always found something true in it, something that had actually been there. I had simply not been paying attention to it at the time." The present moment is full of true things, small ones mostly: the weight of the body, the sound of a breath, the temperature of the room, the fact of being alive in a body that is, right now, resting. These are true. They are here. And the mind that has quieted enough to notice even one of them has found its way back to the only place the teacher said rest can actually be found. Not in the resolution of the past, not in the securing of the future. Here, now, in this breath, this weight, this dark room. Let your attention simply be here for a moment, not working, not waiting, just here. The weight of the blanket or the surface, whichever you feel most. The air moving slowly in and out. The quiet or the particular sound quality of your room. All of it happening now. All of it real. We will continue gently in a moment. The old book has a beautiful and strange passage about the person who lives in peace, even in the middle of the world's noise. It says, and this is perhaps the most reassuring thing in the entire collection, that the mind of such a person is not different in kind from anyone else's mind. It has not been replaced with a superior mind. It has not been emptied out. It has simply learned to bear what it carries without adding to the weight. Not adding to the weight. This is a teaching worth sitting with slowly. When a difficult thought comes, the thought about the unpaid bill, the thought about the person who said the unkind thing, the thought about the thing you cannot fix, there is almost always a second layer, a response to the thought, Often the response is a judgment about having the thought. I should not be thinking about this. I should be asleep. What is wrong with me that I cannot stop thinking about this? And then a response to the response. And so it builds, thought on thought, weight on weight, until the original trouble has been doubled or tripled by everything the mind has added to it. The person the old book describes has not stopped thoughts from arising. They have simply, and this is the practice of a very long life, offered here without any suggestion that you must do it tonight, stopped adding. The thought comes. They see it. They do not judge the seeing. They do not build a second story on top of the first one. This is not adding to the weight. There is a story sometimes told about this very thing. There was an old man who lived alone at the edge of a small village and who was known for his equanimity. People said he was never troubled by things. He would correct them gently. I am troubled by things, he would say. I am simply careful not to also be troubled by being troubled. A young man who visited him once heard this and asked him to explain it. The old man said, "When it rains, I get wet if I go outside. But I do not also stand inside lamenting that the rain is falling on me while I'm wet. I dry off and I drink something warm and I wait for the weather to change. Being wet was enough. I do not need to also be miserable about being wet." The young man said, "But some rains last a long time." The old man said, "Yes, then I am wet for a long time. And still, being wet is enough. Being wet and angry at the rain, and also ashamed that the rain got to me, and also worried that it will never stop raining. That is a great deal more than being wet. Why would I choose all of that? There is, buried inside this small exchange, something that can feel either very simple or very difficult depending on the night. On easy nights, it seems obvious. Of course, you don't need to compound the difficulty. Of course, you can just be wet and trust the rain will stop. On harder nights, it can feel almost impossible, as if the compounding is happening on its own, automatically, before you can even catch it. If tonight is one of those harder nights, the teaching is still here. You do not have to execute it perfectly. You only have to notice when you can, when the second story is being built. The noticing itself is enough. The noticing is, in a very real way, the whole practice. There was a second story sometimes told alongside this one, in the way that teaching stories often come in pairs. There was a woman who was known in her village as a very light packer. When she traveled, she brought only what she needed: a change of clothes, something to eat for the road, a small lamp. People marveled at how lightly she moved. They asked her how she decided what to leave behind. She said, "I ask, before I put anything in the pack, whether it will help me with the journey itself. If it won't, if it's only something I'm carrying because I'm afraid of not having it, or because I've always carried it before, I leave it on the step." She did not mean she left everything behind. She meant she looked at it first. She gave it a moment of honest attention before deciding whether it belonged in the pack for this particular journey. The thoughts that come tonight, perhaps they are like things waiting on the step. Some of them belong in the pack. Some of them are just there because they have always been there, because you have always carried them, because you are afraid of what it would mean to set them down even for a night. You do not have to make any permanent decisions tonight. You are not setting anything down forever. You are simply putting the pack down for a few hours of rest. The things will be on the step in the morning if you want them back. But tonight, you are not walking anywhere. Tonight, the journey is simply the breath, simply the body, simply the dark. Take a slow breath now and let the weight of the pack settle to the floor beside you. It will be there in the morning. You do not need to hold it while you sleep. Let the jaw soften, the hands, the space behind the eyes. We will walk on together in just a moment. There is a quality the old teachers return to again and again, a quality they considered perhaps the most powerful thing a person could cultivate in a lifetime. They called it, in the old language, metta. In ordinary language, it is something like loving kindness, or goodwill, or the warm wish that things go well. For everyone, the teachers said. For friends, certainly, but also for strangers. And here is the part that can feel genuinely difficult, for people who have caused us trouble. And finally, perhaps most difficultly of all, for ourselves. This last one, the loving kindness directed inward, is often the one that people most resist. There is a quality in many of us, perhaps especially in those of us lying awake in the dark tonight, that is very good at extending patience and warmth to others, but that turns a rather colder face toward itself. We would never speak to a friend the way we sometimes speak to ourselves in the small hours. We would never lay a friend's failures out in a row and examine each one. We would never tell a friend that they should have slept by now, that something is wrong with them for still being awake, that they are not handling things well enough. And yet, the teaching of metta, of this simple, ancient goodwill, begins with the person saying it to themselves, not because they are the most important, but because a cup that is empty cannot pour anything into anyone else's, and because the kindness we direct outward is only as genuine as the kindness we can bear to receive ourselves. So let us, quietly, and without any great performance, try a version of what the teachers offered. May you rest. May the mind find its quiet. May you be free from the things that have been pressing on you today. May you be at ease. Say it to yourself the way you might say it to a friend lying beside you in the dark who cannot sleep, without urgency, without judgment, with that particular gentleness that comes when you simply want someone to be okay. There is a story sometimes told about the moment when metta stops being an exercise and becomes something else. There was a monk who had practiced loving kindness for many years in a small monastery surrounded by hills. He was diligent about it. Every morning, every evening, he would sit and direct goodwill outward, first to the people near him, then wider and wider, eventually to all people everywhere, even people he had never met and would never meet. One morning, he was sitting in this practice when he became aware of the sound of a bird outside the window. A small bird with an uncomplicated song, and without planning it, without deciding to do it, he felt the wish, not thought but felt, that the bird should be well, that it should find food and warmth and its own kind of ease. He sat with this for a long time afterward, because it had not been effortful, it had simply arrived. And he understood then that what he had been doing for all those years was not really creating goodwill. It was clearing away the things that covered it over. The goodwill had been there all along, underneath. He had simply been removing the debris. The warmth you feel for the people you love, the small animal you once helped, the stranger who helped you with something. That warmth is not something you manufactured. It arrived. You were simply clear enough at that moment to feel it. Tonight, lying here in the dark, some of that same warmth is available. It is always available. You may not feel it loudly. You may be too tired for loud feelings tonight, but it is there, underneath, the way warmth is in the ground, long after the summer has moved on. May you rest. May the night hold you gently. May the mind, which has been working so hard for so long, be allowed to set its work down. Let us explore one more small story before we move on. There was a grandmother who raised 3 children mostly on her own, and who was, by all accounts, a person of extraordinary patience. When her grandchildren were born and came to visit, they would climb on her and demand things and make noise and leave their small trails of chaos, and she was always hamasabar, calm. One of her children, now grown and a parent herself, asked her once how she had done it, how she had stayed so patient through everything. The grandmother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I used to think I was patient. Now I think I was simply paying attention. When I paid attention to them, really paid attention, not with half my mind somewhere else, I could see how small they were and how much they were trying. And it was very hard to be impatient with something that was trying so hard and was so small." She paused. Then she said, "I think maybe we are all like that, small and trying very hard. I used to try to be patient with myself. Then I started just paying attention to myself the same way, and it was easier, small and trying very hard." Perhaps that is a description of you tonight, lying here, having carried a day, trying to find your way to rest. Small in the largest sense, one person in one room, in one part of the world, in the middle of one night, doing what people have always done, trying to sleep and finding it not quite within reach, and trying very hard, in all the ways that trying shows itself, in being here, in reaching for something gentle, in choosing this rather than the noise of the day. That is not nothing. That is, in its quiet way, quite a lot. The body now, the warmth of it, the weight. Let the goodwill come to rest on you, just a little, the way a hand might be laid gently on a shoulder. Nothing required of you, nothing to return, simply the warmth of being allowed to exist, here, tonight, just as you are. Breathe slowly. When you are ready, we will continue. The old book, near what might be considered its heart, speaks of what it calls the untrained mind as a fish pulled from its home and thrown onto dry land. It flops and struggles, moving toward nothing, unable to find its element. This is a striking image and a kind one, even if it doesn't immediately seem that way. Because notice what the teaching is saying. The untrained mind is not a broken thing. It is not bad or wicked or wrong. It is simply out of its element. Like the fish on dry land, it struggles not because it is a bad fish, but because it is not where it needs to be. The struggling is completely natural. It is exactly what a fish would do in those circumstances. And the element of the mind, the water the mind belongs in, is something like awareness, clarity, the undisturbed present. In that element, the mind does not flop and struggle. It moves beautifully, the way a fish moves in water, without effort, without drama, exactly as it was made to move. You have known this element. You have been in it, not only in meditation, if you have meditated, but in any moment that absorbed you fully. The moment of looking up from something and realizing an hour has passed. The moment of being so present with another person that there was nothing else. The moment of watching something beautiful, a piece of sky or rain on water, or the slow darkening of evening, and being entirely there in it. In those moments, the mind was in its element. It was not empty. It was full. It was just not troubled. Tonight, perhaps the element the mind can find is simply the breath, or the darkness, or the warmth of the body. Something simple and continuous that can hold the mind the way water holds a fish, without effort, without insisting on any particular quality of thought. Let us explore a story about the fish and the water. There was a young student of letters who spent his days reading and writing, and his evenings worrying about whether what he wrote was good enough. He was talented, his teachers said so. But the talent did not protect him from the nightly worry. If anything, he felt the weight of it more than others seemed to. One summer, he went to stay in a house near a large lake in the mountains. He had gone hoping to write, but the air at altitude made him tired in a pleasant way, and the lake was so still in the early mornings that he found himself sitting on the shore before he could think about going to his desk. He sat on the shore for the better part of a week. He watched the lake, he watched the birds, he watched the way the mountains reflected in the water, perfectly, without comment, without judgment, without any opinion about whether the mountain deserved to be reflected. He wrote almost nothing that week. But when he went home and sat back at his desk, something had shifted. The words came more easily, not because the lake had taught him anything directly, but because he had spent a week in his element, in a kind of undisturbed receiving, and something had replenished that the nightly worrying had been draining. The rest you are moving toward tonight is like the lake. It is not asking anything of you. It is simply reflecting what is here. The weight, the quiet, the breath. Without judgment, without comment, without any opinion about how well you are doing. Let the mind come back to the lake now, if it has wandered. And it is fine if it has wandered. The teaching is not to never wander, but simply to know the way back. The way back is always the same. The breath, the body. Here. Let us sit here for a moment in the stillness of the lake. The breath in, the breath out, the body heavy and warm, the room dark and quiet. These are real things. They are here. They are yours tonight. We will go on in a little while. Near the end of the old book, there is a passage about what the teachers called the sage, the person who has traveled far along the path, and the description they give is not, as you might expect, a description of someone who has achieved tremendous things. It is almost the opposite. The sage, they say, has no preferences about where they live. They do not accumulate things they are afraid to lose. They eat what is available. They welcome sleep when it comes and do not chase after it when it goes. They do not chase after sleep when it goes. This is a teaching that can be heard in different ways. It can sound like resignation, like giving up on something you need. But the teachers did not mean it that way. They meant it as the deepest form of trust. Trust in the body's wisdom. Trust in the night's intelligence. Trust that the system, breath and heartbeat, and the slow restoration that happens in the dark, knows what it is doing, even when the mind is unconvinced. The body at night is engaged in a great deal of quiet work. Work that does not require your supervision. Work that, in fact, goes better when you stop supervising it. The restoration of cells, the gentle consolidation of memories, your day, processed and filed quietly in the dark while you are not watching. The repair of the things that wearing out has worn down. This is happening right now, whether or not you are asleep. The body is working. The night is doing what nights do. And your only task in this moment is to let it. There is a story sometimes told about the person who learns to trust the night. There was a farmer who grew grain in a wide, flat valley. He was a good farmer, careful and attentive, willing to work hard. But he had one quality that worked against him. He could not stop working long enough to let the grain grow. In the early days, he would go out at night with a lamp to check the fields. He would stand at the edge of the dark rows and look and listen, as if the grain might be doing something that required his intervention. His wife would wake and find him gone and know where he was. One year there was a drought, and the grain was late, and he went out every night and stood in the dark field for long stretches, worrying. And the grain was late. It did eventually come, but late and thin, and he had stood in the dark field many nights for nothing. The following year, his wife said, "Stay in bed. The field does not need you at night. The grain does not know you are watching. What it needs is the dark and the dew and the slow turning of the weather. Your watching changes nothing." He knew she was right, but that first night of staying in bed was one of the longest he had ever had. By the third or fourth night, something had eased. The field was still out there. The grain was still growing or not growing, and his being awake about it made not the smallest difference. The field knew its work. The body at night is the field, and you are the farmer who can, finally, go inside. Leave the field to the dark and the dew. Leave the body to do what the body does. It has been doing it your whole life, through every night, including the ones when you were sure it wasn't. It knows its work. Let your hands open. Let the face soften. Let whatever you have been supervising be left to the night for a little while. There was a second small story that sometimes goes alongside this one. There was an old woman who made very fine lace, delicate, intricate work that required extraordinary patience and a steady hand. But she was known among her students for always stopping at the right moment, for knowing when to put the work down. They asked her once, "How do you know when to stop?" She said, "The hands tell me. When the hands start to lose their ease, when the thread starts to catch, when I feel the work tightening, that is when I stop. The work does not improve past that point. It only gets harder, and hard hands make hard lace." She put her needles down at that point every time, without argument, without trying to push through, and her lace was always better for it. There is a kind of effort in the night, in lying awake and trying to be asleep, that is like the hands past their ease, the thread catching, the work tightening, and the teaching tonight is the same as the old woman's. When the work has reached that point, the wisest thing is to put the needles down. You have put the needles down. You are here. Let the work rest. We will go on a little further together. There is a passage in the old book that speaks about what happens when we stop comparing. The mind, the teachers observed, has a tremendous appetite for measuring, comparing this moment to a remembered better moment, comparing this life to a neighboring life, comparing where we are to where we had imagined we would be by now. This comparing is not unkind in intention. It is the mind trying, in its earnest and sometimes exhausting way, to navigate, to understand how things are going, to know whether to be satisfied or to push harder. It means well. But the teachers notice something curious about comparing. It nearly always produces a kind of sorrow, because the remembered better moment is only ever a selected moment, the warm parts, the easy parts, and the neighboring life is only ever a surface, seen from the outside. And the imagined life we are measuring against is a fiction entirely, a life that no one has ever lived, because no one's life unfolds the way imagination constructs it. The measuring stick is always wrong, and we have been measuring with it constantly. What the old book gently suggests is that this life, this particular, singular, unrepeatable life, is not a rough draft of some better version. It is the version. It is the one happening now. And the suffering that comes from comparison is a suffering that is, in a very real sense, optional. Not easy to put down, but optional. There is a story sometimes told about the measuring mind and the moment it goes quiet. There was a fisherman who lived by a wide estuary where several rivers came together before they reached the sea. He fished that estuary for many years and knew its particular currents, its moods, the places where fish gathered in different seasons. He was not a famous fisherman. He did not catch the most or the largest. He was simply one of many who worked the same water. For a long time, he compared himself constantly to the others. He watched whose nets were heavier. He asked about other men's techniques. He felt the dull ache of coming in with a lighter catch than the man who fished the northern bend. He went home many evenings with his work sitting badly on him, not because his work was poor, but because someone else's was, on that day, better. One winter, his boat needed repair, and he spent 2 weeks on shore. He walked the estuary's edge instead of fishing it. He watched the water from the bank rather than being out in the middle of it. And standing on the bank, he saw the estuary as he had never quite seen it from the water itself. Its whole shape, where the currents came from, how the different rivers braided into each other before opening out to sea. He saw how the fish moved through it in patterns he had only ever experienced one corner at a time from his boat. When his boat was repaired and he went back out, something had shifted. He did not stop noticing what the other fishermen were catching. But he had seen the whole estuary now, from a place where the comparison was not possible, where there was only the water and its movements, which belonged to no one. And something of that wholeness stayed with him, even out on the water, even when the other boats were doing better than his. He fished more quietly after that, with less grip on what the others had. The estuary of your life, seen from the right distance, has its own complete shape, its own particular currents and confluences, its own bends and openings, not better or worse than any other life's estuary, different, entirely unrepeatable, specifically different. And tonight, lying in the dark, there is a chance to stand on the bank for a little while and see the whole shape of it, not to evaluate, not to compare, but simply to see. Let the comparing mind rest now. It has been working hard. It does not need to work tonight. There is nothing to measure in the dark. Let a slow breath come. Let the body find its ease again. The room is quiet and the night is doing its slow work. We will go on from here. The old teachers spoke often of what they called the middle way, the path between extremes, not the path of great indulgence, of running after every pleasure, chasing every comfort, avoiding every discomfort, and not the path of great severity either, of punishing the body and denying every need. The middle way was something subtler, something that did not declare war on either pleasure or pain, but moved through both with a kind of steady, gentle attention. In the realm of sleep, the middle way is not nothing and not everything. It is not the grasping after sleep, the desperate, teeth-clenching insistence that you must sleep, that you cannot afford not to sleep, that every minute you lie awake is a deficit you're accumulating, which, as you may have noticed, is precisely the kind of effort that drives sleep further away. And it is not the complete abandonment of care for your rest either. It is something in between, something like resting fully, without insisting on what form the rest takes. The body can restore itself in the dark even without what we traditionally call sleep. The simple act of lying still, breathing slowly, letting the mind move at its own pace without interference. This is a form of rest. Not the deepest form, perhaps, but a form that the body receives and uses. You are not wasting this night if you are not, by some particular definition, sleeping. You are resting, and resting is enough. Let us explore a story about the middle way in an unexpected place. There was a baker who was known for bread that was neither too dense nor too light. He had apprentices over the years, and the thing they all had trouble learning, the thing that took the longest, was not the recipe, not the timing, not even the shaping of the loaf. It was the touching. The dough, he told them again and again, needs to be worked, but not fought. If you push too hard, it resists. If you handle it too gently, it has no structure. You're looking for the place in between. Not soft, not hard. Present with it, responsive. His apprentices would ask him how they would know when they had found that place. He would say, "You will feel it. It is like the moment when the dough stops telling you what it needs and starts working with you." One young apprentice asked him how he had learned to find that feeling. The baker thought about it for a long time before answering. He said, "I had to stop being afraid of the dough going wrong. When I was afraid of a bad loaf, I clutched, I gripped, I tried to force the bread to be what I needed it to be, and the bread could feel it." Dough is surprisingly good at knowing when it is being handled by someone who is afraid. The young apprentice worked with that for many months, and he did eventually find the feeling, the place between force and passivity, the place where the dough and the hands were in agreement. And the bread he made from that place was different, not just better in some technical sense, lighter in some quality that was hard to name. The night is like dough in a way. It cannot be forced into a particular shape. It responds to how you hold it. When you grip it, when you insist that it must be sleep, exactly sleep, nothing less than full and perfect sleep, it resists. When you let it be whatever it is, rest, half waking, the slow float between states, it tends to move toward the deeper places on its own. You have, perhaps, been gripping the night a little. This is very understandable. This is what tired people do. But for just this moment, see if you can find the baker's middle place. Not asleep, not forcing sleep, simply resting, simply breathing, simply being inside the dark with the gentlest possible hands. The bread knows its own way to rise. The night knows its own way to deepen. Let a long breath out now, and let the hands open. Let the jaw be soft. The middle way is not difficult to find once you stop looking very hard for it. It is simply here, in the breath, in the dark, in the ordinary warmth of the body doing its ordinary work. We will go on together in just a little while. There is something in the old book that might be the most quietly radical thing in it, a teaching so simple it is easy to walk past. It says, "Do not harm others, do good, purify the mind." This, the teacher said, is the whole of the teaching, the whole of it, in 3 lines. Tonight, we have come a long way from the first part, do not harm others, and we are perhaps too tired for it to need much discussion. You are here in the dark, lying still, harming no one. Whatever the day brought, whatever difficulties you navigated, you are here now, in the most neutral and peaceable position a person can be in. Horizontal, in the dark, breathing slowly. The middle part, do good, is also, for tonight, already done. The goodness of rest is a kind of good. The choosing of quiet over noise is a kind of good. The willingness to soften rather than stay hard is a kind of good. You've been doing good simply by being here. And the third, purify the mind. This is the one that catches, because purify sounds like a difficult project, a long one requiring great effort and perhaps uncomfortable scrutiny. But the teachers did not mean it the way it can sound. They were not suggesting that you sit down and extract from the mind everything dark or confused or unresolved. They were describing something more like what happens to muddy water when you leave it undisturbed. The mud settles, the water clarifies, not because you forced it to be clear, but because you left it alone long enough. The clear water was always there, underneath the mud. The clarity is the nature of water. Muddiness is what happens when the water is constantly stirred. Tonight, the water is growing still. The mud is settling. This is the purifying the teachers meant. Not an act you perform, but a stillness you allow. The mind, left undisturbed, clarifies on its own. It is its nature. There is a story sometimes told about the mud and the settling. There was a healer who worked with plants, a person who understood how to prepare medicines from leaves and roots and flowers. One of the preparations she made involved a root that had to be ground into a fine powder and then dissolved in water. The result was always, at first, a cloudy liquid, the powder suspended throughout, making it impossible to see through to the bottom of the vessel. She would set the vessel aside after grinding. She would do other things, and when she came back, sometimes an hour later, sometimes two, the liquid would have clarified on its own. The powder would have settled to the bottom. The water above it would be clear. She never tried to hurry this. She had learned, early on, that stirring only delayed it. Her young student asked once whether there was any way to make it settle faster. She said, "Yes, stop looking at it." He laughed, thinking she was making a small joke. But she was not entirely joking. She had noticed over many years of practice that the vessel she worried over, the one she checked repeatedly, checking whether the settling had started, checking whether it was done. Those did seem to take longer, perhaps because she disturbed them slightly each time she reached for them. Perhaps because the energy of anxious watching somehow transmitted itself into the liquid. She didn't know. She only knew that the vessels she left alone and forgot about were nearly always clear when she came back. The mind at night is the cloudy liquid. The thoughts, the worries, the day's accumulated sediment, they are the powder in suspension. And the practice, if it can be called a practice, is the healer's practice. Set the vessel aside, do other things, or do nothing, which is its own kind of other thing, and let the settling happen at whatever pace the settling needs. You cannot make it go faster by watching it. You can only leave it alone. Let us explore one more small story that belongs here. There was an old man who was asked, near the end of his life, what he had learned that he wished he had known earlier. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I spent a great deal of effort in my life trying to have a good mind, trying to think clearly and feel appropriately and not be carried away by the things that carried me away. And the effort itself, I think, was part of the problem." He paused. He said, "Toward the end, I stopped trying to have a good mind and simply sat with the mind I had. And the mind I had turned out to be perfectly adequate. It had always been perfectly adequate. It had only seemed troubled when I was fighting it. The mind you have is perfectly adequate tonight. Not because it is quiet, it may not be quiet, but because it is yours, and it is doing exactly what minds do under the circumstances of being alive and tired and in the middle of the night. And the adequacy of it, the simple, unearned adequacy of this mind in this body, in this dark room, in this particular moment, is enough. Let the vessel rest. Let the water clear on its own time. Breathe slowly and let the mud fall. The body is warm. The room is still. Something in you that has been working very hard all day is finally, slowly putting its tools down. We will go on one more small stretch together. The old book speaks in one of its later passages about what it calls the flood, not a flood of water, but something more like an overwhelming, a torrent of craving, of confusion, of the mind caught up in the current of its own intensity. And the teaching it offers about this flood is unexpected. The way across is not to fight the current. It is not to swim harder. It is to find a way to stand. The image the teachers used was of a person who finds a foothold in the riverbed and stands steady in the moving water, not refusing to move, not pretending the current isn't there, standing in it, with it, finding the still place inside the motion. You may have nights when the flood is very strong, when the current is so swift that finding a foothold seems impossible. If tonight is one of those nights, this teaching is not a rebuke. It is simply a reminder that the foothold exists, that the riverbed is there, solid, beneath the moving water, that the strength needed to find it is not extraordinary strength. It is simply the act of being willing to put a foot down. The breath is the foothold. It is always there. Even in the strongest current of thought, even in the worst of the night's floods, the breath is there, slow, steady, doing its work in the riverbed below all the noise. Putting attention on the breath, even for one cycle, even for half a cycle, is the foot finding the bottom. There is a story sometimes told about the flood and the foothold. There was a woman who lived beside a river that flooded seasonally. She knew the floods well. They had been part of her life since childhood, and she had developed over many years a practice that her neighbors sometimes found strange. When the flooding began and the water rose around the house, she would go to the tallest window on the second floor and simply watch. She did not watch in agitation. She watched the way you might watch a fire or a sunset, with attention, without turning away, but also without trying to stop it or direct it. Her neighbors would sometimes call out to her, "Why are you just standing there? Should we not be doing something?" She would say, "I am watching where the water is going, because I have learned that if I understand where it goes, I know where it will be when it pulls back. I know where to look for the things it has moved." She was not passive. She knew when to act and when to wait, but she had a quality of steadiness in the flood that her neighbors did not have, and it came entirely from the watching, from the willingness to be present with the thing rather than flailing against it. When the difficult thought comes tonight, the one with the strongest current, the one that has been circling all day, you can try to be the woman at the window. You do not have to resolve it. You do not have to stop it. You can simply watch where it is going, with the knowledge that when it pulls back, you will still be here, on the second floor, watching. And the watching itself, calm, unhurried, unfrightened, changes your relationship to the current. Not the current itself, your relationship to it. And that is, the teacher said, where the freedom actually lives. Let us sit in the watching for just a moment. Whatever is moving in the mind, let it move. You're at the window. You're on the second floor. The water is doing what water does, and you are watching. Breathe in and breathe out. The riverbed is there beneath everything. Your foot knows how to find it. It has found it before, many times, in many difficult nights, and it will find it again. There is nothing more you need to do. The flood always pulls back. Every time, always. Let us stay here for just a moment longer with this, the pulling back. because it is easy to believe in the middle of the flood that this time will be the exception, that this particular wait, this specific sleepless night, is somehow different from all the others, that it will not pass the way others have passed. But think back, go gently back, the way you might look back along a path you have walked, and consider how many things you were certain would not pass that did eventually pass. The night that felt permanent and turned out to be one night. The difficulty that seemed fixed in place and quietly shifted while you were looking somewhere else. The worry that felt enormous in the dark and in the morning looked, not small exactly, but different, more manageable, more ordinary. There is a story sometimes told about this. There was an old shepherd who tended his flocks in a wide valley that was subject to storms. The storms came fast in that valley, rolling in from the mountains with very little warning, and they were sometimes fierce enough that visibility went to nothing. The shepherd had been through many such storms. Young shepherds who came to work with him for a season were often frightened by the speed and ferocity of the weather. They would ask him, "What do you do when a storm like this comes?" He would say, "I stop walking. I find whatever shelter I can, and I wait." They would ask, "How do you know it will pass?" He would say, "Because they always have. Every storm I have waited out has passed. Some took longer than others. One or two were among the worst this valley had seen in many years, but they passed, and the valley was still there afterward, and so was I." This is the shepherd's knowledge, not hope, not the effortful kind that insists things will be fine. Something more settled, something closer to what the old book calls confidence in the nature of things. The nature of things is that storms pass. The valley, which has weathered everything, is still there. You are the valley tonight. Everything that is moving through you, every thought, every worry, every wave of wakefulness is weather. And the valley is very old and very deep and has weathered everything it has ever weathered. Let the body be heavy and still. Let the mind have its weather. Let the breath do what the breath does. We have almost come to the end of our walk now. One more stretch and then we will rest for good. There is a teaching in the old book that the teachers sometimes called the teaching of interdependence, though they gave it no single name, because they understood that a name can make a living thing feel fixed and finished. The teaching is simply this: nothing arises alone. Everything that is here has come into being through an enormous, unimaginable tangle of conditions. Things that preceded it, things alongside it, things that gave it exactly the right environment to become what it became. And this is true of everything. The flower and the tree, the stone in the riverbed, the thought that arose in you just now, including you. You are here tonight because of a staggering number of things that happened before you. Kindnesses given to your parents and their parents. The particular way light fell on a particular day that changed the mood of someone who then made a decision that eventually, circuitously, impossibly, led to you being here in this room, in this body, in this night. You cannot trace the whole of it. No one can. The web is too wide, too deep, too finely woven. The old teachers pointed to this, not to overwhelm, but to relieve. Because if nothing arises alone, then you did not arrive at tonight alone either. Everything that has been kind to you, every good night's sleep you have ever had, every person who has ever helped you, every moment of warmth and rest and ease, all of that is also here, in the web, contributing to this moment. You did not come to this bed empty. You came with all of it. And whatever is difficult tonight, whatever the trouble is, however it weighs, it too is not a thing that arose entirely within you, entirely because of you, entirely your creation. It is also a product of the web. It has conditions outside you. It was shaped by things you did not choose. This does not mean you bear no responsibility for anything. It means the weight of it is not entirely yours to carry. It is a shared weight, distributed across the whole enormous web of things that led here. Let us explore a story about the web and the weight. There was a woman who had spent many years carrying a particular sorrow, a loss that had come to her early and that she had never quite set down. She carried it carefully, the way you carry something fragile. She was not broken by it. She functioned. She loved people. She laughed. But in the quiet moments, in the night moments, the sorrow was always there, patient and heavy. One spring, she went on a long walk, several days, through a wide countryside, in the company of an older woman she admired. On the third day, when they were resting at the edge of a field full of wildflowers, she told the older woman about the sorrow. She had not planned to. It simply came out, the way things do when you are tired and in a beautiful place, and in the company of someone patient. The older woman listened for a long time without moving. Then she said something unexpected. She said, "Do you know how many people, in how many years, have sat beside a field like this one, carrying something like what you are carrying?" The younger woman thought about it. She said, "A great many, I suppose." The older woman said, "Yes. And the field is still here, and the flowers are still here, and here you are, sitting at the edge of this particular field, on this particular spring day, and the sorrow is with you, and you are still here, and the walk is still beautiful. This is what the carrying looks like from the outside. It looks like a person sitting at the edge of a field, still walking, still here." The younger woman was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I think I had been carrying it as if it were mine alone." The older woman said, "Nothing is ours alone. That is the good news and the difficult news, and eventually, I think, the very good news. Your sorrow tonight, your weariness, your worry, it is not yours alone. Others have sat with something like it, are sitting with something like it right now, in other rooms in other parts of the world, lying in their own particular dark. You are not isolated in this. You are in a very large company of people who are tired and trying and reaching for rest. And that company is not nothing. There is something in knowing it, in genuinely letting it in, that softens the loneliness of the night just a little. You're in good company tonight, in the company of everyone who has ever lain awake and reached for something gentle, in the company of the teachers who wrote the old words, in the company of everyone who has ever loved those words and found comfort in them, in rooms like this one, in nights like this one, across a very long time. You are not alone here. Let that settle if it can. Let the body feel it, the weight distributed across a wide web, the sorrow or the worry or the simple tiredness shared across the company of the night. Breathe slowly. Let the shoulders soften. We are nearly at the end of our walk now. Just one more gentle stretch, and then we will rest. The old book, in one of its most direct and plainly stated passages, says, "The mind is very hard to see. It is subtle. It goes where it will. But the person who can see it, who can look into the mind the way you look into a clear pool and see what is moving there, that person is free." Free is a large word. Tonight, we do not need to aim at freedom. Freedom can take care of itself in time. What we are aiming at tonight is something much smaller and much closer. Something the word free only gestures at from a distance. What we are aiming at tonight is simply this: to be, for a little while, a person looking into the pool rather than a person being the water. You have been the water for much of the day, moving and responding and carrying and providing. The water that rushes where it is needed, fills the shapes it is given, absorbs the temperature of whatever it touches. This is the water's gift, its responsiveness, its warmth, its willingness to be what is needed. But water also needs stillness to show its deepest quality. The pool that is constantly being stirred, the river that is always rushing, these cannot reflect anything. They can only rush. The pool that is left alone reflects the sky perfectly. Not a blurred sky, not a rough approximation. The exact sky with its exact clouds, its exact light. The mind that has grown still enough, not empty, not absent, but still, can see itself in the same way, can notice what is moving in it clearly, without judgment, the way you notice clouds reflected in a pool, not chasing them, not alarmed by them, simply seeing them and watching them pass. This is what the old teachers called awareness, not a technique, not a special state, simply the natural capacity of the quieted mind to notice itself. You have had this capacity your whole life. Every time you have caught yourself mid-worry and thought, I am worrying again. Every time you have noticed a mood shift and named it to yourself. Every time you have been in a feeling and simultaneously known you were in it, that double awareness, that being in the water and also watching the water, that is the pool's capacity. That is the mind that can see itself. Tonight, as the thoughts continue their slow movement, try, if it feels natural, without forcing, to be the pool. Let the thoughts move through your awareness the way clouds move through a still pool. You do not have to go with them. You do not have to stop them. You only have to be still enough for them to be visible. And in the visibility, in the simple, clear seeing of this thought, and this one, and this one, something begins to ease. Not because the thoughts have stopped, because you are no longer lost in them, because there is something in you that is watching them, and that something, by its nature, cannot also be carried away by them. There is a story sometimes told about the pool and the seeing. There was an old gardener who kept a small ornamental pond in the center of her garden. She tended it carefully, not the fish in it or the plants around it, but the water itself. She kept it clear. She removed what fell in. She made sure it was not stirred. Visitors to the garden often stood at the edge of the pond for a long time without saying anything. She noticed this and asked one of them once what they were looking at. The visitor said, "I can see the sky in it, the whole sky. Every time I look up and then look back down, the sky is here too." The old gardener smiled and said, "That is why I keep it clear, not for the fish or the flowers, so the sky can come in. Your mind, at its clearest, can hold the sky. Not just the small stretch of sky directly overhead, the whole available sky, the enormous open expanse of what is real and present and happening. The thoughts move through it, like clouds, as clouds belong in a sky. And the sky, the vast, open, untroubled sky of awareness, holds it all without effort. You are that sky tonight, not the clouds, the sky behind them. Let this settle all the way down, as much as it can. Let the body be very heavy now. Let the breath come and go without any direction from you. Let the mind have its clouds. Every one of them is welcome. None of them are your enemy. All of them will pass. You are the sky. And the sky, as any sky will tell you on a clear night, is already at rest. We have walked a long way together now, and the walking is nearly done. We have walked a considerable distance tonight, through many teachings and many small stories, each one turning the same gem of an idea in a slightly different light. We have sat with the image of the mind as the source of both difficulty and ease. We have looked at the clouds and remembered the sky behind them. We have visited the weaver and the fisherman, and the woman who kept her records, and the farmer who finally stayed in bed. We have held the lamp in the dark and noticed it has been with us all along. We have let the packed bag rest on the floor. We have offered the difficult guest a seat. We have stood for a moment on the narrow bridge and noticed the river below. We have watched the estuary from the bank and sat with the baker whose hands found the middle place, and looked into the still pool and found the sky. All of these, in their way, are images for the same thing, the mind that has finally put something down, not permanently, not forever, not in the resolving of every problem or the settling of every question, but for tonight, for this moment, for the length of this breath. Let us tell one more story, not a teaching story exactly, but more of a gathering story. A story about a person who found rest not at the end of a long journey, but in the middle of an ordinary evening. A person who found it without intending to find it, which is perhaps the only way it is ever truly found. There was a woman, a completely ordinary woman, in a small house in a quiet village, who had been carrying a great deal for a very long time. Nothing dramatic, nothing singular, simply the ordinary accumulation that comes to people in the middle of their lives. Responsibility, worry, small griefs, the dull weight of things unfinished and things unfixable. She had become so accustomed to the weight that she had stopped noticing it was there. It had become part of the feeling of being herself. One evening, without particularly planning it, she sat down at the edge of her garden as the light was failing. She had meant to go inside. She just didn't, quite yet. She sat and she looked at the garden, not evaluating it, not making notes about what needed doing, just looking, the last light on the leaves, a bird somewhere near the back fence, the smell of something warm from a neighbor's window. She was not thinking about the things she usually thought about. She was not trying to not think about them. They were simply not here, in this garden, in this light. They were somewhere else. She sat for perhaps half an hour. Then she went inside and made something simple to eat and went to bed. She slept better that night than she had in months. She didn't know why. She hadn't done anything. She had simply sat in the garden in the failing light, with nowhere to be and nothing to do, and no one asking anything of her, until the evening came in fully and the stars appeared and the air cooled. This is, perhaps, what the old book is describing when it speaks of the mind at rest. Not the mind that has been fixed or emptied or trained into stillness by great effort. Not the mind that has passed some threshold and arrived somewhere better. Simply the mind that has been left alone long enough to find its own level. The mind that has not been asked to perform or solve or judge for long enough that it has forgotten for a little while that those are things it knows how to do. And perhaps this is the teaching that lives underneath all the other teachings. Beneath the stories of the weaver and the fisherman and the baker and the old farmer and the woman at the window during the flood. Beneath the images of the sky and the pool and the lamp and the estuary, the underneath teaching is simply the mind already knows how to rest. It has always known. before you learned anything, before you began your long career of managing and solving and anticipating. Even then, the resting was available. It was the first thing you knew, as a very small creature in a very safe darkness. And it is still there, underneath everything else, patient and unchanged. You have been sitting in the garden tonight. You have been sitting in the failing light. The teachings have been the birds and the neighbor's window, and the smell of something warm, small things, not important individually, but together creating the conditions in which the mind can forget to be restless. The stars are beginning to appear. You do not have to hold any of what we have passed through tonight. You do not have to remember the weaver or the fisherman or the woman who kept her records or the healer who left the cloudy vessel alone. You do not have to recall the passage about the fish or the sky or the lamp or the flood. These things have already done their work without your help, the way the evening light does its work on the garden simply by being there. You were here. That was all that was required. You brought yourself here, into the gentle company of these old ideas, and you stayed for the walk. And the walk has done what walks do. It has tired the mind pleasantly, in the way that a long, gentle stroll through countryside tires the body. Not exhausted, not depleted, but eased into a heaviness that belongs entirely to rest. The mind has perhaps softened, somewhere along this walk, perhaps only a little, perhaps only in one corner, like a room that has been opened to a window on a warm day. That is enough. That is more than enough. The corner that has softened is real. The ease that has found its way in is real. And from that one corner, the ease has a way of spreading quietly through the whole room in the hours that follow. The old teachers sometimes compared this spreading to the way warmth moves through a cold stone over the course of a day. At dawn, the stone is cold all the way through, but the sun touches its surface, and the warmth begins to move inward, slowly, through the stone's layers, until by evening, the stone holds the day's warmth inside it and radiates it gently back into the cooling air. You cannot see this happening. You cannot feel it moment to moment, but it is happening. The warmth is traveling. The stone does not need to do anything to help it along. You have been warm tonight, not dramatically, not all the way through perhaps. The nights we carry with us are thick sometimes, and warmth moves through them at its own pace. But the warmth is in you now, and it will keep moving inward while you sleep, finding its way into the cold places, the tired places, the places that have been waiting quietly for something gentle to arrive. Let us settle here now, at the end of the walk, and let everything grow still. We have walked a long way together tonight, through old and gentle ideas, through small stories and quiet images, through the weaver's loom and the fisherman's net, and the farmer's dark field, and the woman sitting in the failing light of her garden, through the baker's hands finding the middle place, and the healer's cloudy vessel left to settle, and the old man at the window watching the flood, through the still pool and the sky it holds, and the enormous web of everything that brought you here. And now the walking is done. You have passed through a kind of country tonight that the old teachers knew well, the country of the mind's own nature, the country of thoughts that rise and pass, of the sky behind the clouds, of the fish in its element, of the lamp that gives just enough light for the next step. This country has no border. It does not start and stop. It does not belong to any one tradition or any one old book. It is simply the interior landscape of being human, the terrain that every person who has ever lain awake in the dark has traveled, whether or not they had any words for it. You have traveled it tonight, gently, in good company, with no destination and no requirement and no assessment waiting at the end. You do not have to carry any of it forward. You do not have to understand it or sort it or file it away. It has already settled into you the way good rest settles into a tired body, without your effort, without your supervision, simply by being received. The old teachers had a phrase they used at the end of certain teachings. It translates roughly as, "May this be for the benefit of all." Not just the person in the room, all. Every being that carries a mind, every creature that has ever lain down in the dark and wished for rest. This small and gentle night, this quiet walk through old ideas, let it be for all of them. Let whatever ease has come to you ripple outward, the way a stone dropped in a still pool sends its rings to every shore. You do not have to do anything with this. You do not have to direct it or manage it. Simply know that the kindness of rest, the kindness of choosing this, of lying down and reaching for something gentle, is not a solitary thing. It belongs to a very wide circle. Now let us come all the way home. There is nothing left to figure out tonight. There is nothing to solve, nothing to prepare for, nothing to rehearse or revisit. Whatever was waiting for your attention when you lay down, it is still there, and it will still be there in the morning, and you will meet it then, rested, with whatever you have that is fresh and unhurried. It is not going anywhere. You do not have to hold it through the night. Let it rest on the step outside the door. The door is closed now. The lamp is burning low. The house is quiet. You are here. This body, this breath, this moment, and there is nowhere else to be. There is no other version of this night that you need to be having. The one you are having is the right one, because it is the one that is here. Let the face soften completely now. The space between the eyebrows, where so much effort collects without being noticed, let that go. The jaw, which holds more than it needs to, let that go. The place at the back of the neck, and the shoulders, and the chest that sometimes rises too high when the mind is working, let all of that go by degrees, the way snow melts. Not all at once, just softening slowly, at its own quiet pace. The breath is still doing its slow and faithful work, in and out, as it has always done, as it will keep doing, as it does not need your permission or your attention to continue. Simply notice it if you can. One long breath in and one long breath out. And then let even the noticing go. Let the body go heavy, very heavy. The heaviness of someone who's been walking in good country all evening and has finally sat down. The heaviness that is not exhaustion, but completion. The heaviness that belongs entirely to rest. The hands can be open, palms up or palms down, whichever they naturally prefer in the dark. The legs can be however legs want to be when nothing is required of them. The whole body can arrange itself according to its own wisdom, without instruction. The mind may still have thoughts. That is fine. Thoughts are allowed always. They are simply weather. And the weather tonight is soft. Not dramatic, not loud. Small thoughts moving through a clearing sky, on their way somewhere else. None of them belonging to you. None of them requiring a response. None of them asking you to leave this warm and heavy body and go somewhere with them. You can stay here. You are allowed to stay here. The old book ends, as all good things end, not with a command, but with a kind of opening, a gesture towards something that has no name, because it is before language, before effort, Before the mind started its work this morning, before you were someone who knew things and needed things and carried things, before all of that, there was simply this, the breath and the body and the dark. You were there before all of it. You will be there after all of it. And tonight, for a little while, you can be there again. In the before and the after, which are really the same place. The place of simply being, without agenda, without task, without the weight of what has passed, or the anticipation of what is coming. The garden is dark and quiet. The last light has gone from the sky, and the stars have come in, and the air has cooled, and the birds have found their places for the night. The lamp has burned to a small, steady point, enough to show you where you are, enough to tell you that you are safe. Soon it will not be needed at all, because the dark is not a threatening dark. It is the same dark that has held every sleeping person, in every house, in every night, since the beginning of sleeping and houses and nights. You are in that dark, held in it, part of it, the breath in, the breath out. Each one a small and complete thing, each one enough. There is an image sometimes used by the old teachers for the state of a mind that has truly come to rest. They described it as a lamp in a windless place, not extinguished, burning quietly, without flicker, without being pulled this way or that by any current of air, perfectly still, perfectly itself. This is not a lamp that requires effort to stay still. The stillness is simply the absence of wind, and the wind, tonight, is dying down. The day is far away. The morning is still a long way off. There is nothing asking anything of the flame right now. Let your flame burn quietly, still, steady, simply itself. There is no wind here. There is nothing that needs to disturb you. The room holds you. The night holds the room. And beyond the night, in the way that things are always held by something larger and quieter than themselves, everything rests. Rest now. The body is yours to lay down. The mind is free to drift. The night knows what to do with both of them. Sleep well.